Good morning, everybody, especially to those of you on the West Coast and to our presenters here from Napa Valley. This is Lars Light from the Somm Journal, thanking you all for joining us and welcoming you on behalf of our partners, SommCon and National Geographic, publishers of the New Sotheby's Wine Encyclopedia. This is the last of our 10 webinar series, Geographical Digest, with our partners SommCon, who have been putting these webinars up on their very valuable resource, SommGo. We thank them for that. Great educational outlet there. We'll be coming back with our next series called Winery Close-Ups with National Geographic and the Somm Foundation, an organization that is near and dear to all of our hearts. There will be a recap of this webinar in the August-September Somm Journal. The recording will be, as I mentioned earlier, the recording of this will also be put up on SommGo as well as sommjournal.com. And our mutual YouTube pages. And this right now is also being broadcast live on Facebook Live, the SommCon page on Facebook. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions for panelists, and you please put them in the Q&A if they're questions for the general panel. If you have individual questions or comments for any of the producers, please feel free to throw those into the chat section. I'd like to thank my landscapers for being out my back door right now. I don't know if that sound is coming through, but timing is everything in life. So we're here to talk about Napa. Napa is renowned throughout the world. Ironically, it is one of the smallest and most diverse winemaking regions of the world. Only 4% of California wine comes from Napa, but it is, as I said, an iconic wine country destination, place that many of us dream about. It's got many different soils, many different varieties, but pretty much Cab is king there. And today we have a very impressive panel gathered, people who really make it happen. These are people with their hands on the pulse and their hands on the wheel of Napa Valley. So I'm going to start it off by introducing Teresa Wall, who is Marketing Director of Napa Valley Vintners, who is co-presenting with us today. Napa Valley Vintners is a nonprofit trade association that promotes and protects the Napa Valley appellation and its premier wine-growing region. I think it's really cool. I didn't realize this until today, Teresa, that Napa Valley Vintners was founded in 1944. So you've got a long-standing tradition there. And a very, very strong organization. So Teresa, welcome.
Thank you, Lars, and good morning or good evening to all of you, depending on where you are in the world. I think it'd be really great to know if any of you have been to Napa. So if you could put that in the chat, just gives us some perspective of who we are talking to today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to give you a bit of a brief primer on Napa Valley before we turn it over to these great winemakers who are going to tell us more about their own wines. So if you have been to San Francisco before or somewhere here in California, you would see that you would know that we are right here just above the bay. So if you fly into SFO, it's about a 50-minute drive to Napa Valley from where San Francisco Airport is. As Lars said, we make a small amount of the wine produced here in California, and yet a lot of people tend to think that we actually make a larger amount of wine than we do. It's only 4% of all wines produced in California are from Napa Valley. We are known for Cabernet, but as you'll see in some of the slides coming up, we have quite a diverse climate and soil range here in Napa Valley, and we're able to produce a lot of different varieties. So let's look at the AVAs. I'm not going to dive in deep on this. I don't think we have that much time today. But what I want to make note of is that there are 16 what we call sub or nested AVAs within the actual Napa Valley AVA itself. So the whole Napa Valley is itself an AVA. And if you see that on the bottle, it means that it probably doesn't fit within one of these subregions. And then there are 16 AVAs within that. What we call this map is kind of like our Jackson Pollock map of soils. So because of the millions of years of geologic activity that took place here in Napa Valley, that's why you see this color here today. Not only that, but we also have a river that runs through our valley, and then we also had erosion that came down the valley that brought the soils down from the hillsides. And so we have a real mixture of soils here. It also provides us a great opportunity to produce many different styles of wine and a range of varieties as well. This definitely comes into play. Our climate, we are blessed with the Mediterranean climate. Only 2% of the earth is blessed with this climate. Nowhere else in the United States can you find a Mediterranean climate, which means that generally it doesn't rain in the summer months. It's only occasional that might occur here. So probably from, depending on the year, May or June through probably September, sometimes October, probably mostly October, you wouldn't see rain here in Napa Valley. What is amazing about our valley is the topography. One of the amazing things. At the very end, Carneros, we're at sea level, and yet we've got the ranges on both sides that bring us up to more than 2,000 feet in some areas. Temperatures, so just as an example of how much it varies from the top of the valley to the bottom of the valley, I drove this morning from Napa, and it was 49 degrees when I got in my car. By the time I got up here to St. Helena, it was 54 degrees. And you can see that I'm wearing a sweater today. And that's because if you live here in Napa Valley, you dress in layers. So in the morning, it's cold, but I'm wearing sandals and I have a t-shirt on underneath, and I'll probably be taking the sweater off because it will get to about 70 degrees, mid 70s by the end of today. So here's a great aerial view. Now I'm going to step into some aerial views to give you some groundwork for what these folks are going to talk about with their wines. So over here, you'll see how close we really are to the ocean, and as well the bay right here. And because of that, we get a lot of really amazing cooling effects, which allows our region to grow the fine grapes that we grow. So you get fog that comes in through the Napa, through the Petaluma Gap, then comes over here into the top part of our valley. And then you get fog that comes in here from the bay all the way up through the valley. So I'm going to just show you a couple different views of what we were looking at. This is the south facing north, and it really does kind of show that curve effect that we have in our valley. It's not a straight valley, it just curves a little towards the end. It's really broad at the end of the valley, and it narrows as you get to the top. So where you might think that because if you go north, it's cooler, it's actually the inverse here. As you go north, it gets warmer in the valley because it gets more narrow, and the heat stays more trapped in the valley. Whereas in the southern part, you get a lot more cooling effect, and it's less enclosed from the mountains. So here's a view of Carneros looking north. And so what you'll see over here is this is the beginning of Mount Beater, and the valley will go up over here. This is the town of Napa right there. So over here in Coonsville, and we will have both Russ and Raj talking about wines from Coonsville. Russ is over here, that's where he's going to be talking about. And then we have Raj is going to be talking about a vineyard that is over here a little bit later. But notice how Coonsville is tucked right alongside these mountains. Another thing to know about Coonsville and all the way up through Stag's Leap is the wind. So in the evenings, we can open our windows at around 4 o'clock in the afternoons to cool down our houses because of the wind that comes in and it cools down the valley. Most of us don't really need air conditioning because of that. Stag's Leap. So what you hear about a lot are in Stag's Leap is the winds coming in the afternoon. You've got the range, the mountain range tucked right here, warms up the valley. And then I'm going to show you this other view of Stag's Leap as well, because you can really see how these hills play a factor. So Russ is going to be talking about his winery property, which is tucked in right here behind this hill. Okay, and then here we have Rutherford. So when you hear about alluvial and fluvial soils, this slide will give you a good idea of what that means. So alluvial soils are soils that erode from the mountainsides and come down, and we call these alluvial fans that are right here on the mountainsides. And then here's the Napa River right up the middle of the valley. On the valley floor, that's fluvial soils. It means that the soils were put in place through flooding and erosion that happens through the river. Let's see, and we have Joel is going to be talking about a wine from right here in Rutherford. Now this is a great view of Pritchard Hill over here. And Cyril is going to be talking about a wine from right here in Pritchard, on Pritchard Hill. You can't quite see his vineyard. And then Joel is going to also be talking about, Joel's going to be talking about a wine from Sage Canyon, which you also can't quite see from this aerial view, but it's right tucked over here. Just to give you some context, then we jump over here to Atlas Peak. Alex has got some vineyards. His property is right here at the top of Atlas Peak. I don't think you can quite see where his vineyard is. It would be behind this peak right here. And then let's see. Then let's go on down here to just see the north end of the valley. You can really see how it really narrows and tucks in. This is St. Helena, tucks in right here up into Calistoga. And then we're almost done. So before I turn it over, let's talk about Chiles and Hope Valley. This is the main valley floor, but then you've got Chiles Valley right here. It's almost a valley, another valley within our valley. And then you've got Hope Valley right here, where a lot of growers are starting to, well, not starting, have planted grapes. And Carrie is going to talk about some vineyards there, as well as Michael is going to. And then the last thing I want to tell you about is Premiere Napa Valley, coming up in about a week and a half now. Premiere Napa Valley takes place every year. It's a really special time for us, where we come together as a community to put really special and unique wines up for auction in very small lots, in 60 to 100 bottle, 120 bottle increments, which allows the winemakers to get really, to do something really unique and special, and really hone in on a small portion maybe of a vineyard, or do something really special that they may not be able to do at a larger production size. And that is an auction that takes place every year. It is a fundraiser for our organization, Napa Valley Vintners, and the whole winemaking community comes together. It's a trade-only auction, and we welcome people from all over the world. So that's taking place in just over a week and a half. And we invite you to join us. It'll be live streamed online this year, as well as is taking place here in the Valley. So hopefully you'll look into it and you can join us. So back over to you, Lars.
Great. Thank you very much, Teresa. It was wonderful seeing those maps. And now let's put into place some of those names that you mentioned. So our first presenter is Carrie Gott, who is going to be, he's the winemaker going to be presenting for Calla Lily Estate, his 2016 Ultimate Red. Carrie is a founder of Vineyard and Winery Estates consultancy, and he's fourth generation in California winemaking, fourth generation family. He's worked for such notable names as such notable names as Montevina, Corbett Canyon, Seagram Chateau and Estates, Sterling, and Mumm Napa. So Carrie, great to have you here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice, cool morning here today, and certainly a change of weather for us, but we're deep into spring. So of all of us winemakers, we talked briefly yesterday, and we're all going to pick on one topic, and one of them that I'd like to show you is the status of the vineyards. I assume everybody can see that. So I took these photos yesterday at Calla Lily in our 20 acres of vineyard. That's a Cabernet cluster, and it's just starting to flower. And if you look at it, that's a flowering cluster.
We're not seeing anything, Carrie. Sorry.
Oh, Let's try it again. Now do you see it?
Yep. Beautiful.
Okay. Sorry about that. So that is a flowering Cabernet cluster. And what happens is the little top of each of one of those that actually looks like a grape is actually a little cap that's sitting on top of the pistil and stem, and the cap actually comes off. And if I can get this to do it right, come on. So there you see, those are going to be, they'll be 5 or 6 times the size of what they are there. There's a close-up. You can see the little pistils. You can see the cap. That is a great example. So at this time of year, the vines are flowering. We would expect to pick these grapes at the end of September. So there's a shot of our vineyard. Our soil is fairly like a bench soil. So that's Howell Mountain in the distance, and our soil is eroded soil that comes down from the mountains, not very many rocks in the soil. We have 20 acres of vines that have all the classic varietals for the Bordeaux varietals with Cabernet, Cab Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and a little bit of, what did I leave out? Malbec. So that's something unique in the vineyard and really unique in Napa Valley. These are old grapevines. They're huge in size. They're probably at least 35 years old, but it is one of the few remaining blocks of AXR rootstock with the Martini clone. Could be a lot of different clones on top. It has an old clone that we know as Martini clone, but it's AXR rootstock, and virtually 99.9% of all of those vineyards are gone in the coast because they were killed by phylloxera. But we have this one section, and it makes stunning wine. It's on a lighter style. We always blend it into our wines. And to give you an idea how big the vines are, they're pruned very tall, and they're huge vines. They don't produce a lot of grapes, maybe 2.25 tons per acre. So the wine that we are tasting today, can you see that?
I still see the hand on the vine.
Okay. Come on. Let's try another share here. Sorry,
Okay.
people. My God. Can you see that?
Nope.
Okay, so the wine we're gonna taste, or I'm tasting today and telling you about, is our 2016 Calla Lily Ultimate Red. It is a blend of 84% Cabernet, 6% Cab Franc, 6% Merlot, and 4% Malbec. We produce two different wines. One a little bit deeper in richness and style. The other one is our ultimate red that we have here to taste. So,
Karen, what do you think that you mentioned those percentages, and I think I have a good idea of what the Cab Franc and the Merlot kind of bring to the table, but what are you getting from that little bit, that 4% of Malbec? What does that contribute to the Cab there?
well, the way Kelly and I put the wines together, we lay out all the wines that we've made for the year. And several times that we do this, and we have a concept of the style that we want the ultimate red to be. And for the Audax, we're trying to build a little bit more muscle and mass in the wine because it's going to age longer. It is substantially more expensive. So the Cabernet is the foundation. The Merlot adds elegance. The Malbec, whether we put it in or not, adds some spice in the aroma. There's always just a very small amount of Petit Verdot if we decide to add it, and we didn't in this year, but it adds depth to it. And then we use Cabernet Franc, and it knits the whole wine together. Cabernet Franc is one that ties all the strings up and makes the wine complete. So we produce about 60 to 70 tons of grapes a year. We sell to a few tons of grapes to other wineries. The rest come into the winery, and we make each of the wines individual. Very classic, which I think is Napa Valley style production. We get the grapes usually somewhat over 25 bricks, maybe close to 26. It's basically a percentage of sugar that's in the grapes. We sort the grapes, destem, and then they're pumped into tanks, and they sit for 3 days. So it's a cold soak at probably 55 degrees. We warm the tank up, and then we use a very particular blend of yeast, D254 and UV43. We get a good clean fermentation. We pump the tanks over by hand. You know, the guy on a forklift at the top of the tank, pumping over. We do that 2 or 3 times a day. And then we're monitoring all along. We usually ferment around 82 degrees Fahrenheit. We're monitoring the fermentation. We're tasting the wines every day. And when they're dry, Kelly and I elect whether we're going to leave them on the skins for 1 or 2 more days. They change quite a little bit if you leave them on the skins, the wines can pick up more tannin, but they develop a new particular aroma that I'm looking for in the wine. Kelly is more focused on particular flavors that she's very interested in. And then we drain the tank. The free run goes to a tank. The skins go in a press. They're pressed, and then we keep the press wine separate and the free run separate. Usually we blend the press wine back in because we don't press very hard. We're not looking for the last drop, but press wines add a little bit more muscle and style to it. We just don't get carried away with pressing. So our vineyards in operation is fairly old. The vineyards, the major section of the vineyards, like the shot I showed you, not the AXR vines, they are about 20 years old. They're on a very good resistant rootstock 110R. And our vineyards climb up that hill. There's a couple little sections of vineyards you can't see, like where the Malbec is, or the Cab Franc, or Merlot. And so it's a great ranch. We have reservoirs for water. We have great neighbor vineyards around us. So it definitely is a viticultural area that was started to be developed mostly in the 60s, and then more vineyards in the 70s. When I was at some other wineries, I used to buy a substantial amount of Sauvignon Blanc and some Cabernet out in Pope Valley. And it is not a heavily populated area. There's no real city in Pope Valley. There's a garage and a gas station, and that's about it. So it is an area that is below the Howell Mountain area. One of the things that's slightly different about the Pope Valley climate is that we don't get the morning fog and high clouds that is typical of the major part of Napa Valley. So for you to all see what we are, this is the Calla Lily label. Yeah, the name Calla Lily comes after a name of one of the owner's wives. Really likes calla lilies. We find the wine, so this is the 2016. So it's been in bottle for a couple years, and it's developed a very elegant nose. The wine is round and rich, has a beautiful fruity top piece to it. But then in the mouth, there's great depth. As you can see, well, you didn't see all the numbers, but the wine was aged in barrel for 22 months, 40% new French oak. I don't like to, for this wine, I don't like to go more French oak than that. And the alcohol is 14.8, and the TA is 6.1, and the pH is 3.76 for any of you that are interested in those numbers. But it is a great style of wine, and it's due to the soil and our gentle winemaking. So
thank you for that, Carrie. The wine is great, nice soft tannins, great depth, nice spice, really well done. Thank you for that. And there's your timer alarm. If I can figure out how to shut it off, we'll move along. So thank you very much, Carrie. And next up we have Cyril Chapalet, who is going to present his 2016 signature Cabernet, as well as the 2018 Pritchard Hill. Cyril is the eldest son of the founder. He moved to Napa when he was about 10 years old with the family. He studied management, worked in business for about a decade, and then returned to his roots in wine. Today, he is CEO and involved in all aspects of the business, as well as many aspects of the community. So Cyril, welcome.
Lars, it's great to be here. Hey, Carrie, you did that 10 minutes to the dot. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. One of the great things about this, first of all, I'm really honored to be with the panelists that are here, and I think this is pretty terrific. Many of you are full-time winemakers. Joel has been making wines pretty much forever and has been a close friend, and nobody in the Chappellet family has ever been technically the winemaker. We've always had somebody. My father always basically was stating that he was the best assistant winemaker out there because he could roll a hose, roll a barrel, do whatever needed to be done to do that. We've all taken positions to help in the family business. So I'm going to give a little history of who Chappellet is. I'm going to throw some slides, some pictures up here just to give you a view of Can you see that? That's a picture of our vineyards and looking out over the Napa Valley and Lake Hennessy. So if you can see that, then that's kind of gives you an idea of kind of where we are in the Napa Valley. And I'll go through a few other pictures as we move forward. But back in 1966, 67, my father had the ability or met with Andrei Chelichev, who was really kind of the guiding light for my father to decide to look at hillside farming. And at that time, there were really no barriers to entry. There's kind of a humorous picture here with my brothers and sisters a couple of years later as we are part of the picking crew. I'm sure we probably ate more than we picked, but that's part of life, and that's how it works when you're kids. That's the whole family. That's my board of directors. That's who I speak to. That's who I do my daily work for every day, plus about 80 employees that we have, and our business has changed dramatically from those very early days. You've got a picture on the right-hand side of my brothers and sisters and my father and mother when we were breaking ground on the new barrel building that we built and the new facility to be able to make wines here on Pritchard Hill. We've had a winemaker, Phillip Titus, now for about 37 years, and just remarkable. This is the winery that he makes his wines in. Pritchard Hill is a unique spot. When we got there for the first 30 some years, we had no neighbors. We were just up here all by ourselves, making some wine, doing what we thought was best. We had a number of different winemakers. Phillip is by far the longest winemaker that we've had. And I think that my father's comment was always the best is yet to come. I think it's always good. We're always shooting for perfection, trying to do what we can do to show the flavors and structures of the grapes that we produce from Pritchard Hill. All of the vineyards that were planted here when we first got here, which was about 80 acres of vineyard, have been replanted as of now, and many of those areas have been replanted 2 or 3 times. I will have a picture in a moment, but then we'll talk a little bit about the structure of what varietals and where they all are, and we've got them really mapped very clearly as to what that is. And this is a picture overall of the big block of vineyard. That big block vineyard on the left-hand side there was vineyard that was planted when my parents first got the property, and that has all been replanted several times since that time. So we've had over 50 years. On the right-hand side is the detail that we deal with, which is the specifics of all the different blocks of vineyard that are represented. Even though we are in one area, the diverse microclimates of the small blocks and the soil conditions and the way the wind hits it, the sun hits it, all the different things that we believe goes into the word terroir is critical. And we've learned over the years what things do better in certain areas, what clones work well. Joel talked a little bit about disease-resistant clones, 110R and some of those, and AXR, and which was not disease-resistant. And you know, if we look at that, it really is a mix of being able to do the best farming practices. And we've been organic for years and years, and we think that that's a very good thing. We also, as you saw from the previous picture, we also manage all of our power through solar power. We reclaim all of our water. We are trying to be the best stewards we possibly can. My job is to turn over a better piece of property with a better culture, better longevity for the next generations, to continue going so that they have an easier shot of being able to do the right thing. And it's all about quality. So when we're talking about this gives you a little bit of an idea of where we are. And I'm going to mouse around here a little bit. All the red is Chappellet vineyards and all the different clones and the different levels of vineyard blocks that we talked about, that I showed you on the previous picture. But the just to give you some ideas of some of our neighbors, if you, this area right here, that is where the Bryant vineyards are, and that's where they are. Pat Coletto is over on the ridge, over on the far side, right over here, and just kind of get right up to that section right there. So that's where Pat Coletto is, and that's where his vineyards have been. And I believe that Joel or somebody has some vineyards that are in that area too. So just giving you an idea of a little different direction. Also, you're going to be talking about Stagecoach. Stagecoach is the great big vineyard right behind us, right back on this area there. We get some grapes from Stagecoach too. And I have to tell you that the Gallows have brought in a level of farming and a quality of farming there that's just stunning, absolutely amazing. And they're doing some great things. I think you should keep watching for great things to come from those vineyards. They'll be talking about that too. And on the other side of this kind of long little block of red here that we're showing here of our vineyard, and the square block that's kind of squared off, that's not squared off because that's the right growing areas. That's squared off because if they went any farther out of that square, they'd be on our property. And so that's the Colgan vineyard of the new development they're doing. And they've laid out an incredible vineyard in that area. So that's kind of where Pritchard Hill is, and that's where we are. But as I said, for the first 30 years, we had no neighbors. So things have gotten very different. We've gotten some remarkable neighbors, some great folks there. We do not get the benefit. You saw that picture earlier of the lake in front of us. We don't get the benefit of being able to use the water out of that lake because that's the drinking water city of Napa. But we're an important part of that lake because a percentage of the water that ends up in that lake initially drops onto us first before it gets there. So we want to make sure that we're not adding anything that could be detrimental to that lake or doing anything including erosion, pest issues, or pesticides or anything else. So the organicness has been really important for us here. So winemaking, and the team that makes our wine is Phillip Titus, and his team has got 6 or 7 other people that work with him at the winery. We brought 2 wines here today. We brought our 2018 Signature Cabernet and our Pritchard Hill Cabernet. Both of these wines, which are really the backbone of who Chappellet is. The Signature Cabernet is denoted by my father's signature on the label. I've been told by some of my brothers and sisters. Anyway, there's a signature right in there. I don't know if you can see any of that, but I guess it just depends what the direction is, but that's what that is. And it's a little broader distribution. It's a wine that's around the country. And our objective is to make that very consistent year in and year out. The bulk of this, the vast majority of it, comes from our own vineyards, the vineyards I just showed you a moment ago. And the blend on this wine is interesting because these wines always change. There's nothing automatic. There's nothing that has to say what percentage we would put in this wine in any one year. And if the wine is better because we can put some of the other Bordeaux varietals in it or use different blocks of vineyard, that's what we're going to do. And that's what the winemaking team has to get their arms around. And in this vintage, it's 85% Cabernet, 10% Petit Verdot, 5% Malbec. Many of you who have been watching this wine for years said there's years that we only have 75% Cabernet. We might even have some Merlot or some Malbec. We have all 5 Bordeaux varietals that we grow here on Pritchard Hill. And that really gets to the speaking of how we make these wines. Our winemaking team is fairly similar, I think, to what Joel and Carrie were talking about. We'll talk about a little bit. Is we like collaboration. We like to talk to our friends about the wines that we're putting together. And in our team, there's about 6 people who go through the blending trials and blending process. The Pritchard Hill Cabernet is slightly different than that because the Pritchard Hill Cabernet is put together based upon the team throughout the year and throughout the fermentation and throughout the next year and a half, looking at what are the very best barrels in the winery, what are the wines that become a great melding of a remarkable bottle of wine for a long-term wine and a bigger, kind of more intense wine. And that comes in this bottle here, and there's the Chappellet Pritchard Hill bottle. We typically would think of the Pritchard Hill being the longer aging wine. We would probably give that about 24 months in New French Oak on that wine. The Signature Cabernet usually gets about 22 months. Some New French Oak and some second year French Oak on the Signature Cabernet also. The idea of both these wines, we want them to be lovely when you first drink them, but we also would like to have them age well. And we expect people probably to age the Pritchard Hill Cabernet a bit longer. We have a lot of longevity. We have wines back into the 70s that we've retried. We had a tasting 50 years of Chappellet, and I can tell you we've got wines in the early 70s that are showing remarkably, actually much more youthful than you might expect. So we do know that aging is important, and we have a percentage of people who do age. Lars, looks like you're trying to ask a question.
The only question is, I've got to cut you off. Will you forgive me? Because you're
I'm sorry. Did I go over?
Yeah, you
I
promised
wasn't even
you would
getting
actually.
started. I'm sorry about that. I will get right on. Thank you very much.
No worries.
That
Thank
closes
you.
out my comments. So thank you very much.
I can see from the background that your wines are age worthy. I like that, and definitely both beautiful wines, great complexity, as you mentioned in the Pritchard Hill, of course, as one would expect. So thank you very much, Cyril. Great presentation. And now we yield to Alex Guarachi of Guarachi Family Estates. Alex is a native of Chile. He came to study in the U.S. on a scholarship for soccer, came for soccer and stayed for wine. He started his own import business, working out of his garage, running every single aspect of it. And now he has developed into a producer as well as an importer and marketer. So Alex, welcome. It's great to have you here. You're on mute, though. You need to unmute, Alex. Thank you.
How about that?
Great. Perfect.
All right, great.
Excellent.
So, what I like to do to start first, thank you and for inviting me and to be among all of you guys. Obviously, I was born and raised in Santiago, Chile. My father was an attorney and he wanted me to be an attorney, and I graduated from high school and I said, I'm getting out of here. And I'm telling you a little bit of that because I think it all ends in Napa, right? So came to the US as a tourist, playing soccer with some friends in Los Altos Hills at Further College. The coach saw me playing. He said, listen, you're a student? I said, no, I'm not. Would you like to come to school? I said, yes. Would you like to play soccer for us? I said, yes. I did it for 2 years. And then after that, I got several scholarships, including a full ride to Stanford.
Wow.
So, of course, everybody until today, they say, you're nuts. You didn't go to Stanford. I went to San Jose State because they had a better team, a great team. So I went there and played for 2 years. My last year was a senior. We're ranked #1 in the nation. We had the best record. I was captain of the team. In the middle of the playoffs, I'm ready to sign a contract, a professional soccer contract, and I got injured. I got a hairline fracture on my outside metatarsal. So I was gone. I was down for a year. That American dream that I was thinking about it, playing professional soccer in the US, was gone. So I graduated, and about a year later, I had a good friend of mine that unfortunately he passed. He had a small little Silicon Valley company, and he had the money. They have no money. I said, listen, I got this brilliant idea. Let's import wines from South America. Let's start with Chile. He loved wine. I said, okay, let's do it. And this is 35 years ago, friends. And I brought my first container, actually my first 2 or 3 containers. I unloaded with my own hands. I don't know if I can do that today. But I introduced wines from South America, starting with Chile, in the backyard of the California wine industry. I was living in Palo Alto, Mountain View, San Francisco, and all my soccer mates and friends would say, Alex, are you crazy? Are you nuts? Are trying to sell Chilean wines in the backyard of the California wine industry? I said, yeah, maybe I'm so, yeah. So I was going out of business for at least, 5 years. But things changed after I moved to Southern California. In Southern California, people were more cultures, more people trying to learn about wine, and they were more open to taste Chilean, and then after, with Argentina. But with a lot of pride and humble, I could say, I'm the guy that introduced South American wines in the United States. So from nothing, working out of the garage, building one account at a time in Southern California, Northern California, driving from one end to the other end of the state, then going across country, we built a little business. It became a bigger business, and we became Importer of the Year in 2010. So that was an amazing accomplishment. At that point, a lot of people started to get in the back wagon of the South American wine industry. And around 2007, right? So at that point already, I decided, Paul Hobbs and I were being friends for years because he worked in Argentina, I worked in Argentina, we worked together, and occasionally we'll say, Alex, what do you need to do? We need to make wine in Napa. And okay, let's do it. We never did it. So one day I said, Paul, I want to make a wine in Napa and maybe a Pinot in Sonoma. So what is it going to take? said, well, it's going to take a lot of money. Oh, okay. So went from sales and marketing now to producing. So that was in 2007. That was my first release. It was wonderful. And we made wines with Paul for a few years. And then Julian Gonzalez, his winemaker, he came to work for us. And that's another story, which I'm not going to tell you about it because it got a little, I mean, Paul was disappointed. But anyway.
Tell us a little bit more about your Napa experience, please. Your wine, your Atlas Peak site.
Absolutely. So that's one, I made wine for a few years, but I could not get the consistency. I could not get the quality that I was looking for. So in 2014, I bought a great vineyard called Meadow Rock, and at the top of Atlas Peak. So we're at the very top. If you take Soda Canyon Road, you go all the way up, you hit at the very end is As and Antica. So there was a vineyard for sale. Of course, it was kind of a fixer-upper, and we bought it. It's 50 acres, which 32 are planted. And it's a wonderful vineyard. It's all red volcanic soil and produces amazing wines. One of the things about being up there, we're above the fog line, so you get the minerality, and because of the red volcanic soil and all of that, you get the good concentration, good structure, and it makes wonderful wines. And being above the fog line, even though it's cooler than the valley floor when it's warm, but because we're over, it's sunny through the entire day, and of course at night it cools down in a big way. So, but you get the right ripeness, and we get good minerality. So aging potential, which is fantastic. The wines have been developing beautifully. And I like to show you a quick little PowerPoint, if I see this. So here we are, and as you can see, everything is sort of mountain grown. We're at the very top of Atlas Peak, over 1,800 feet. Oh, it's not moving. There we go. Wow. So here's what we're talking about. These are the two wines that we're making in Napa, which we'll taste in a minute. So we got G by me, Alex Guarachi, from our own state. So both wines come from our own state, so a state bottle. The 2017 G is a Bordeaux blend of Cabernet, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. And the 2017, the Napa Valley state bottle, that's 100% Cabernet. So the wines are aged 20 months in French oak, and the G is about 20% new, and the rest is in second use. And then the Cabernet is 20 months also in 100% French oak. So I like to play this little drone video, if I may.
You got 2 minutes to show it, Alex.
Okay, I'll go quickly. But, I think it shows our humble little winery right there. And we have a reservoir with a little bit of water, but it's really pretty. But while we're talking, I'd like to taste the wines with you.
Sure.
So, I find that notes of really black, this is the G, black and red fruit. I think the red fruit comes from Malbec. Great concentration, really great aromas. That black cherry, good chocolate flavors, really a pretty wine. And in the 2017 Napa Cab, here we got a little bit bigger and richer, more of a Atlas Peak testament of what can be done there. You'll find here rich and complex, but a lot of great minerality. So the wine will age beautiful, even though it can be drunk right now, but I think it will do fantastic with years putting the wine away.
Absolutely.
Cheers. I hope you enjoy the wines, and thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Both wines are beautiful. They really reflect that high altitude and that great minerally soil. So
Yes.
very nicely done. Thank you. And what a great
Thank you.
all-American story as well. Great bootstrap story. Thank you for sharing that too. And
Sure.
congratulations. So next up, we have Michael Eddy, who's the winemaker for Louis M. Martini. He's showing his 2017 Napa Valley Cabernet. Michael grew up in Southern California, which, of course, Alex alluded to earlier. Michael studied biology, got into home brewing, and through a restaurant job, started tasting his way through the wine list, and that led to a career in winemaking. He got his master's from UC Davis in food science, specializing in enology. I worked at several Napa Sonoma wineries before working with and succeeding Michael Martini. So, Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lars. So I want to start really quickly by telling a bit of history about Martini. I think in order to describe who you are and where you are, it helps to talk about where you've come from. And this is actually kind of cool right after Alex's story of coming to the States. Because in addition to helping ground us in who we are today and the wines that I'm making, it really is one of those great American dream stories. And I would submit that we have lots of work to do to make the American dream more accessible to more people. But as something we aspire to and a concept, I think this is one of those examples that's really fantastic. So Louis M. Martini grew up in Genoa, Italy. His father was a fisherman, and his father came over to the San Francisco Bay and was working out here. And at some point, he called for his son to come out and help him. And we believe around the age of 13, Louis M. Martini took the voyage across the ocean on ship, came through Ellis Island, took train all the way across the country by himself at 13 years old to join his father. And they were part of the Italian-American community there. They bartered and traded. And so as the story goes, they would trade their cioppino, which was made from their leftover fish because refrigeration was not readily available. And they traded for some wine grapes. And young Louis M. tried making some wine, what we often refer to as the first batch of Martini vinegar. But the point is, whether or not the wine was good, which I know the first wine I made wasn't very good, it sparked that little spark of passion within him and ultimately led him to decide that this is something he wanted to pursue. He did not want to follow in his father's footsteps and do fish. He wanted to pursue wine. So he goes back to Italy, learns a bit more on the technical side, makes wine in various parts of California, but ultimately in 1933 lands smack dab in the middle of Napa Valley in St. Helena, builds his winery where we are today, which we just renovated a couple of years ago and reopened, but still with that same original 1933 shell. And just 5 years after he builds his winery in 33, he buys a vineyard on the Sonoma side that many of you have probably heard of called Monte Rosso Vineyard. And I'll get to why that's important in a moment. But from everything I can tell, Louis M. was a really interesting character. I think he was quite opportunistic. He had one of those unique combinations of both vision and kind of scrappiness. He saw opportunity, vision and luck together. And he also wasn't necessarily a traditionalist. He was fairly innovative. But when we get to his son, who was the next winemaker, Louis P. was very innovative, but more on the technological side. But he continued his father's kind of vein and attraction to mountain sites. Louis P. for years bottled California Mountain Cabernet, California Mountain Barbera, et cetera. And so this thread of mountain sites definitely runs through, and red wines runs through the family's history. This is the two gentlemen here, Louis M. on the right and Louis P. on the left. And ultimately we get to a third generation, Mike Martini, who I worked with for a good decade. Mike was yet again a very different character, but really carrying on much of the tradition of his family. And that kind of brings us to me. I don't have the last name Martini. I am not from the family. So as a fourth generation, it is quite frankly a bit of a weight to carry sometimes to carry on this tradition. But I do want to say I am not trying to make any of the wines that any of the Martini gentlemen made. But what I do is absolutely inspired by and informed by who we are and where we've been. It's kind of what I want to highlight when we taste the one wine that I'm addressing today. But ultimately, you see this vein of, I think, three concepts. One, very focused on red wine. We still make some white wine. We've made white wine in our history, but there's definitely a focus on red wine. And Cabernet Sauvignon in particular, appropriately being right in the heart of Napa Valley, is a focus. And in fact, I make 10 Cabernet Sauvignons today, 11 if you count the rosé that I make out of Cab. And so Cabernet is definitely a focus. Also, this attraction to and working with a lot of mountain sites, not exclusively by any means, but mountain sites are definitely a part of the entire portfolio. And then also this idea of innovation and not being too stuck with tradition and being willing to break some rules here and there, which I think primarily comes from our founder. So with that, the wine I'm talking about today is our 2017 Napa Valley Cab, one of the 10 red cabs that we make. And we had some really great aerial images. This is not nearly as enlightening, I don't think, from a topographical standpoint, but just to give you an idea of kind of the core of the vineyards that go into the Napa Valley Cab are really kind of scattered throughout Pope Valley, Childs Valley, and Stagecoach up at Atlas Peak or at the foot of Atlas Peak. It's not all within the AVA. And that's important for a few reasons. And some folks have already touched on it. When you get up at elevation, a couple things happen. First of all, being on the east side of the Vacas, you do get a little bit of a rain shadow. So rain shadow is when moisture hits mountains, and then on the backside, there is less precipitation, less moisture generally. You also have, particularly in Childs Valley, soils that can be very limiting to growth. They're spots that are very high in magnesium, which helps mitigate the growth and vigor of the vines, which means lower crops, which means better exposure, smaller berries, all of which lend concentration and more structure to the wine. And in fact, there are spots, honestly, in Childs Valley where you would be hard pressed to grow vines, soils that are so high in magnesium that it's kind of too much of that mitigation of growth. So very important, grounded in those mountain vineyards. Also use Snows Lake is a vineyard in Lake County that's at elevation, quite high elevation. Use both Cabernet, but also Petit Syrah from there, which as we taste this wine, here's a little bit of compositional information. Again, not sticking to the traditional 5 Bordeaux varieties because we don't feel that we always need to honor tradition necessarily. And I think Petit Syrah is a really powerful blending grape. To me, Petit Syrah is a single varietal. While I enjoy it, its Achilles heel, if it has one, is that it can be a little monotone. It's kind of this dark fruit, lots of tannin, but without a lot of layers. However, Cabernet Sauvignon is fundamentally more layered and complex. You get herbal tones, you get fruit, you can get earth, you can get spice. So you already have this complexity. So Petit Syrah acts as a really nice modifier to add this kind of blackberry, dark plum fruit and really amp up the density and structure of the wine. So it's really very powerful. I think this, I'd have to check my notes, but I think this vintage is maybe the most I've ever used. A lot of our Cabernet in 17 was a little brighter, fresher, more kind of accessible. And so the Petit Syrah really helped to add some depth and richness to it. And I definitely try to walk that line of overripe, but not overripe. So pushing just towards maybe a little compote-y, but not to the dried fruit, certainly not quite to the full jam. Not a lot of oak, 29% new is not huge. It's primarily French, a little bit of New American, adds some nice spice, and certainly a hint of that coconut, which again, just starts to add layers to the wine. So I hope you enjoy the wine. We would love to see you at the winery. As I mentioned, we just renovated the winery and opened, let's see, it was March, I believe, of 19, done by Howard Backen. So it's really created a fantastic space. We have a culinary team now who does several experiences pairing the wines with different bites. And Martini Park, for those of you who remember it from the old days, has expanded even bigger. I want to say it's close to a full acre. It's a beautiful space. We rent cabanas out there. When the weather's nice, kind of here through harvest time, it's a really great place to come and just hang out. So thank you for your attention.
Bravo. Thank you very much, Michael. The wine is gorgeous, beautiful. I can't get over the aromatics, beautiful, deep, dark fruit aromatics,
Yeah.
a little bit of tobacco, a little bit of dark chocolate, really, really something special. And the wine is just very, very nicely done. Good job on the legacy there. So thank you for that. So next up, we have Raj Patel, who is going to be presenting two wines, his 2016 Malbec and 2016 Cabernet Sauvignon, as wines from Napa Valley. Raj is a native of India. He moved to the U.S. in 1972, studied UC Davis. I bet it feels like 1992, right, Raj? But it was 72. He interned at Robert Mondavi, and that inspired a lifelong passion for wine and winemaking. So, Raj, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to present. It's been an interesting journey. First, I didn't come from a family of wines. My dad probably had more drinking of beer and spirits. And so my first knowledge of wine was when I started working as a lab tech at Robert Mondavi and tasting wine. And so it was an interesting journey. Had a great opportunity to meet with Tim Mondavi multiple times. And it was great being a lab tech. You learn a lot about the wines, and that was a biochem background. So it was good for me. And then I went into the world of finance and then came back and dabbled in it. And then eventually in 2007, a great time to start with a great vintage. We started out at 100 cases. We're trying to get it to 2,000 cases, but a couple of years we've had some resets. And so, but we will get there eventually. And a couple of different wines we make. We try to make single varietal wines, 100% Cabernets and Malbecs. The Malbec that I want to talk about comes from Stagecoach Vineyard. Stagecoach is around 1,200 to 1,700 feet in elevation. It's a very large vineyard. I would say for anyone who comes to California, come to Napa and come and see the sites. If you want an education on what the wine really comes out to be, go walk the vineyards with the owners or the vineyard managers. And that's a really neat education to have. And one of the things about the vineyard over there, it has this beautiful iron rock soil. There's about 205 to 210 different blocks of Stagecoach. They're always replanting and doing things up there, but it's uniquely managed now. They're doing a great job, Gallo and Company, who purchased it a few years ago. And it's been great working with them. And we're continuing to, evolve that. And they're great winemakers, as they call them, wine growers. And it's a beautiful project we have. It's 100% Malbec. And the way we make our wine is we start out with, and I'll give you an example. If we were making 5 tons of it, we'll take between 20 to 25% of that tonnage and barrel ferment it. And then to give it this beautiful mid palate, we'll use a 500 liter barrel to do that. And then the rest of it is in an open tank or punch down. And then we'll also use pump overs. We have automated pump overs now that we use for each of the tanks. So it gives us this beautiful complexity. And then we take some of that and we put it in new oak. We tend to stay between 70 to 80% new oak using Darnajou, Terenceau, and sometimes Salvan. We go between medium toast, a few heavy toast, but never toasted ends. And so we have this beautiful spice rack of Malbec, and we'll have anywhere between 10 to 15 barrels of it, or 12 barrels. Every vintage is different. And then we'll start blending them. So we keep it 100%, but by blending different styles of making it, between the barrel fermented and not barrel fermented, between brand new oak or something that's once used or twice used, which is neutral, and oak that has had leaves that were stirred and not. By using all of these different methods, you come out with different layers. And In the Malbec that we have, a percentage of it, we do bleed. I think somewhere between a 10 to 15% bleed works well. The Malbec up there being a mountain fruit, if you go beyond that, it seems to get really grippy. And it's a beautiful Malbec. It's purple in color. It has this beautiful dark notes to it. And we, Julian Ferrard is our winemaker, and Julian really makes the wine in the vineyard. We try to keep our hands out of it as much as possible. Starting the fermentation, we usually cold soak it for about 4 days, and then we let extended fermentation go on, sometimes as many as 14 to 20 days to give it this flavor. And that's not with all of the wines that we do that with, but a portion of it, and then we blend it back. So the key thing is to compartmentalize, make serious, in the best way of saying it is actually making multiple different Malbecs in different barrels and then blending it back together. And hopefully, Lars, you have some there. Oh, you're on mute, but that's okay. Right. So that's,
I'm harking back to my conversation earlier with Carrie about what does Malbec bring to the blend. And this wine has such incredible bright fruit, especially on the finish. It all of a sudden pops on the finish, this brightness of fruit. It's delicious.
Thank you. And it starts out that way, and then as it opens up, you'll see the darker and darker fruit come in. It's a beautiful Malbec, and getting 100% Malbec. Some things we don't think about that in Napa. I think there were, when we first started in 2012, which was our Premiere Valley auction lot, it was our first Malbec that we did. And then after that, in 2013, we started out with making 100% Malbec. I would say that over the years, there's been more and more tonnage of Malbec being planted in Napa, which is a great thing. And so we're looking forward to that and having more and more producers make it, making it more and more available. I think the consumers will be more adapted to that. So really thankful for that. And it's catching on well. And it's a great place to make Malbec. Really nice from a stylistic standpoint and from a purity of a fruit standpoint. I think it's the weather and the climate and the terroir is great for that, especially on mountain fruit.
Great.
The next conversation. What's that?
Great spice box flavors.
Yes, it is. It is. The next conversation is in regards to Coonsville. So Coonsville is, if you're in downtown Napa and you're looking towards the East Hills, it's in the foothills there. Just look towards the east and it's right there. It was an appellation that has been formed since 2013, a sub-appellation. And since then, we started doing that. We have harvested fruit from the same vineyard since 2007, but in 2013, once the sub-appellation was approved, we started making the Coonsville Cabernet as a separate varietal, AVA. And what's really nice about it, it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's the old traditional 337 clone. It comes off of a slight hillside. It's a beautiful site. It's beautiful fruit. And what's really nice about it is that Coonsville is unique in the sense that you get really nice fog in the morning. It stays cool. We get a longer growing season, well into the last weeks of October, first weeks of November. Traditionally, lately, it's been moved up a little bit more, but we get this beautiful long season. So that way the seed becomes nice and brown. And the tannins, the berries are small. There's a unique nose to it that you don't get from other AVAs, but it's unique. We also make a Cabernet that is from Rutherford, and which is about, as the crows would fly, about 12 miles up valley. And what's so interesting is you can take both of those Cabernets, 100% Cab, and you'll see what Napa Valley terroir has to offer. You'll see how different they are. Same winemaker, same regiment, harvested about 3 weeks apart. And the Rutherford further up valley gets harvested sooner. As you go further south, it's later on in the season, and yet you'll see two completely different wines. And I always tell someone who is sometimes might not understand how that happens. I said, just imagine planting your favorite apple tree where you're sitting right now, where your house is now, and planting another one 12 miles north of you, 12 miles south of you. and you would have two same exact apples and how they would taste different. And they're like, oh, I see that. And it is so unique. And for individuals that are in the wine business and wine lovers, it is something difficult to grasp at times, but there are a lot of wineries that are making wines from sub-AVAs, same winery, same winemaker. And so it's really nice to go out and do that. So I would say that for all the audience, go out and come to Napa Valley, come out and try all the different wines we have. And, you know, this is Patel Napa Valley right here. It's been a great venture. We've been, like I said, started in 2007. There are challenges that we have in the wine business, but it's all been great. Love the people and Napa Valley itself and all the contributions that all of us share together and the way we share notes on how to make wine. It's something that is a part of our culture and our DNA that you just don't find anywhere else. Definitely not from where I came from Wall Street. We definitely don't share notes there, but but definitely in Napa Valley. So thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Very, very nicely done. And you've got a little bit of time left, very short, under a minute, but you and I had a conversation the other day about Malbec, and the sort of Malbec was certainly not either admittedly or widely known that it was planted much in Napa. And we're starting to see it a little bit more and more. What is your take on that? Is it an impact of climate change? Is it an impact of growing awareness of the grape variety, and what it can contribute to wines? What's bringing it to the up a little bit?
I think it also has to do with consumers. Consumers, you know, they started tasting Malbec. Malbec actually comes from France. A lot of people don't know that, but it is a Bordeaux varietal. But you know, they think that Malbec comes from Argentina, which majority of the wine of Malbec today does come from Argentina, but the varietal does not. It's actually from Bordeaux. And what's happened is the economics has changed, where individuals start out drinking wine, and as we say in Napa, you know, everyone starts out with a white Zinfandel, and then they moved up to Cabernet. I think with the Malbec, they started out with something and they wanted something different, somewhere that was probably a lot more complex, a lot more different. And I believe Napa Valley offers that. And from the terroir that we have there, it produces a great Malbec and something that is unique in the sense that it could be substituted. If you're going to have a steak, you can have this Malbec with that. It is a big wine. It is well-rounded. It will stand up to some of the best steaks out there. And so it is a great substitute for that, because there are some who may not like the Cabernet, but they may like this. And so I believe that this is what's coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Raj.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now up we have Joel Aiken, who's going to be presenting Scattered Peaks 2018 Cabernet and 2017 Small Lot Cabernet. Joel, I honestly think to this audience, Joel doesn't really need an introduction. A longtime winemaker at Beaulieu. He retired to consult, and he helped found Scattered Peaks with Derek Benham. He grew up in Fresno in a farm family, studied ag at UC Davis, and I think there's no argument about it. If anybody knows Napa Cab, it's Joel Aiken. So Joel, welcome. Honor to have you here.
Thank you, Lars. It's great to be here. To be here with good company. A lot of friends that I've worked with through the years. Russ, Michael, Cyril, his vineyard manager, Dave Pirio, and I went to school together. And I don't know how many years Dave's been there. Cyril, probably well over 30 years, but great guy. So pleasure to be here. So I'm talking about Scattered Peaks, which is a fairly new brand to most everybody. We're on our fourth vintage of our Napa Cabernet, and we'll be tasting the 2018, and then the first vintage of what we're calling our Small Lot, which is from a couple of special vineyards I've sourced the fruit from. And actually with the next vintage, we're doing single vineyard bottlings. But right now what we've got are 200% Cabernets, which is interesting as we've been talking about all of the blenders and some single varietal bottlings of other Bordeaux varietals. But a lot of my history is with Cabernet. And before we get into the Scattered Peaks wines, I thought I'd talk about some of the history of Napa Cab and my history as well. So the only real job I ever had was 27 years at BV. I thought I'd be there for a year or two, and it was like, well, this isn't a bad place. So interestingly, most people don't know this, but for a number of years, and maybe still today, BV crushed far more Napa Cabernet than any other winery. When I was there, we'd do sometimes 5,000 tons a year, and from at least 50 different vineyards. So I've made Cabernet from the south in Carneros to the north in Calistoga, from Spring Mountain on the west to Howell Mountain and beyond to Charles Valley and Pope Valley in the east. And I've got to say, from all of these regions, we could make some pretty great wines. But if you go back into for me, my early years in the 80s, there were some great vineyards and some challenging vineyards. And I think over the last 40 years, we've seen a great evolution in the quality of the grapes that we're growing. When you go back to the 80s, a lot of those vineyards were planted in the 60s, and typically on the valley floor, there were 8 feet between the vines and 12 feet between the rows, because that's the size you needed to get a Ford tractor through the vineyard. And very little trellising. We would have 2 wires to support the canopy. And so a lot of vigorous growth, a lot of green herbaceous characters that we were always challenged to work with. And through the years, one thing that at the time was somewhat of a disaster that I think in the long run turned out to be a blessing was phylloxera. Came through and slowly wiped out pretty much all the vines in the Napa Valley. A few that were not on AXR remained. But as we had to pull those vines and replant on these deeper, richer soils, we added drainage. We had a new selection of rootstocks that we could have something that was less vigorous. And then we had many different clones. I was lucky enough to work through a clonal trial of 14 clones at BV. And so we could select clones for different parts of the valley that would give us the right intensity. So we took vineyards that were challenging decades ago, and I think has just upgraded the overall quality of Napa Cabernet immensely. So it was a great place to learn about Cabernet. Actually, before that, I had one harvest job at Inglenook, founded in 1879. BV was founded in 1900, and the first vintage of Georges de la Tour was 1936. And I've got to say, I've been lucky enough to taste through all 81 vintages of Georges de la Tour, and lucky enough to have worked with Andrei Chelichev, who I think we all owe a lot of where we are in Napa Valley today to his history. So anyway, I am going to talk about Scattered Peaks now, which is a fun brand. Derek Benham is the owner of Scattered Peaks. We've been collaborating on this for a few years, and Scattered Peaks is really about a couple of his passions. He's a surfer. That's him in front and me in back carrying his surfboard for him. But he also jumps out of helicopters and skis on different peaks around the world, and likes to make wines from mountain vineyards. And I said, okay, well, when we do this, let's make some mountain vineyards, but also let's do some wines from the valley floor in Rutherford. All right, I'm not getting there we go. So I don't know if you can see, depending on what you have on the right of the screen, there's the label, and it's kind of up here. You can see there's in front, there's these waves from where he's surfing, and the term Scattered Peaks comes from, as a wave is breaking as it comes to the shore, it's called Scattered Peaks. So that the mountains that he skis off of, and because we're making mountain fruit for a lot of our wines, is where the name came from. So that's the two of us. So I'll be tasting 2 wines today, talking about them. The 2018 Napa is our 5th vintage, and it's interesting. We've done blends with other varietals in the past, but now this is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, and so is the small lot, which is from Morrisoli on the Rutherford Bench and Sage Ridge, which is across from Pritchard Hill. And interesting that they're 100% Cabernet. When I was at BV, we made a lot of 100% Cabernets, and that's because until 1983, you only needed 50% varietal to label something Cabernet Sauvignon. So you could have a Cabernet that was 49% Chenin Blanc, And we always did 100% cab. So I learned how to use Cabernet from different parts of the valley that might be a little softer, as other people might use Merlot to soften a wine, Petit Verdot. I got some fruit from Carneros that was like so powerful and dark and tannic. It was almost like Petit Verdot. But these two wines, the Napa Valley, 100% cab, 18 months in French oak, 6,400 cases produced, and about 40% new French oak. So here you see the vineyards. The majority is coming from Usabelli, which is, again, it's Pope Valley, but on the hills near Howell Mountain. Makes a powerful wine, a lot of dark color intensity, good tannin. As I always insist, we have a little bit from Rutherford, so Vineyard Round Pond, and then there's some from down in Oak Knoll. And this wine is very powerful wine. It's built to age, even though it's approachable. It's got a lot of dark color, a lot of cherry fruit, and backbone that I love making wines that age. I always say a great wine region is making red wines that have to stand the test of time. And I think this wine will definitely do that.
Amen to that.
A lot of cherry, some of the black cherry, a nice balance of oak. I really don't like having my wines over oaked, but lots of layers and good firm tannin. I had a dinner the other night for a guy who was getting married, and we had some great steaks, and that's a perfect wine to go with it.
Yeah.
So the second wine is, we're calling this a small lot. It was the first year that we got these two vineyards. So Morrisoli is across the street from Beebe, next to Scarecrow, next to Inglenook Napa Valley, Phelps Manly Lane. It's in the sweet spot of the best part of the Rutherford Bench. I love using that wine, and we're going to be bottling it up on its own in the future. And it's interesting, that is from the valley floor on these alluvial fans, whereas Sage Ridge is up in the hills, very steep, rocky hills, tiny clusters, and you would think the wines would be different than they are. The Sage Ridge is actually fairly lush and soft and round with lots and lots of layers, which you look at the soil, you look at the grapes, you think this would be the tannic, powerful backward wine. But the Morrisoli is, even though it's bigger clusters, bigger production, it's always had this incredibly powerful tannic backbone. Andrei Chelichev and others used to talk about the tannin in Rutherford Cabernets being powerful but well behaved, kind of like the iron fist and the velvet glove. And the blend of these two, even though in the future we'll be doing them separately, is just pretty fabulous. It's powerful, but it's got many, many more layers than a lot of other wines I've worked with. And knowing these two vineyards, it will age for decades and decades. So love the wine.
They're beautiful, Joel. I have to say, I don't know if it's power of suggestion, but you say Rutherford and I'm thinking Rutherford dust because I taste it in there. And you say Sage Hill and I'm thinking dried herbs because I taste that in there. But two beautiful wines. Thank you very much. It's an honor to have you. All right.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, we have Russ Weiss, who is president of Silverado Vineyards. Russ grew up working in vineyards with his father and his grandfather in Madera, California. He taught literature as well as English and French in California, France, and Japan. I hope I got all that right, Russ. But in 1987, he returned to Napa, and he's worked at Christian Brothers, Robert Mondavi, Opus One, before joining Silverado. He has served as chair of the Stag's Leap District as well as the Napa Valley Vintners Association. So again, another fantastic authority that we're honored to have with us. Russ, welcome.
Well, terrific to be here. And Joel, thank you for admitting you're from Fresno. Central Valley boys unite.
I think I outed him on that.
And Lars, what a panel. I mean, you really did it. You knocked it out of the park again. I'm reminded just with the amazing sort of mosaic of experiences of everybody on this panel. You know, Cyril, you mentioned terroir, and terroir for us means so many things in the Napa Valley, a mosaic of soils, a mosaic of climates, but I'm also reminded that it's a mosaic of people and just fantastic people. And I just want to echo what everybody else said. It's just an honor to be here. And it's also great to see some friends that I haven't seen for a while. So yeah, so I'm just the lucky guy that that got to follow Jack Stewart as the second manager of the Miller family's amazing estate here in the Napa Valley. Ron and Diane Miller and Diane's mom, Lillian, really got interested in the Napa Valley, like so many native Californians, in the early 60s, and they traveled here quite a bit. And then by the mid 70s, they decided to take the plunge. Ron always liked to say, stepped off the curb and got hit by the crazy bus. And Diane always remembers, coming into the valley and just past where Don Giovanni is now, as the valley kind of opens up. Teresa showed us those beautiful photos, just falling in love every time with the beauty and kind of the jewel box quality of this amazing place that we live, which makes, with the neighbors I've got here, as you can see, just tremendous wine. So that's sort of the modern history of Silverado, pulling together some amazing and historic sites from our Sauvignon Blanc ranch in just south of Yountville that was originally planted by the Dunlaps in the 1870s, to the vineyard you see over my shoulder here, which was planted first by Abel McFarland in the 1883, to our Coonsville Mount George vineyard, which was planted by Henry Hagen, one of the pioneers of Napa, back in 1868. So they really collected an amazing estate that John Emmerich, who's been with us 32 years now, has been able to play with for quite a while.
And he's only 40 years old, right?
Yeah. Right.
Welcome, John.
Yeah, and and it's great because Elena Franceschi, who's been with us 25 years, our associate winemaker, they, talk about a dynamic duo and a lot of continuity on a great site.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the ancient history. I think the modern history, of course, of the vineyard behind me is a little bit more interesting. We were mentioning, Carrie was mentioning some terrific sort of clonal material that we're using. Of course, the site that you're seeing behind me is the mothership for the C selection, which, so little known, what does chocolate have to do with the Napa Valley? Little known fact, Harry C., who is the scion of the California C's candy chocolate, chocolatier family, actually was the guy that restored this property in the 1950s, 40s and 50s, after, it had, obviously Prohibition took it out of commission for vines. And the Geckens were running cattle out here, and Harry C. is the guy that replanted it, and then replanted it to Chardonnay mostly, interestingly enough, but a little tiny bit of it to Cabernet. And his viticulturist, John Brock, over the years did a massive selection that ended up delivering to us UCD 30. We always call it the C selection, but Davis kindly dubbed it the Silverado clone. I don't know if anybody actually calls it the Silverado clone in the valley, but C selection is kind of the moniker that it gets. But it's that UCD 30, and that really produces Solo, which is only one thing. It's only Cabernet. And it's our way of honoring Brock and C and honoring this very unique California clone. And then we have another vineyard, down at Mount George, which is just totally unique down there. Raj was mentioning Coonsville, and what a fantastic place that is to grow fruit. And Raj was also mentioning Spice Box. I love that phrase, Raj, Spice Box. That's, Mount George we planted in 1987, and that's got 5 different clones of Cabernet, and that's where the Malbec is, and the Cab Franc, and the Petit Verdot, a lot of Merlot. We think Merlot is tremendous down there where it's a little bit cooler. Cab Franc and Merlot particularly down there, just tremendous. So I thought with that, I would just, you know, if you'll indulge me, you know, do that terrible, you know, screen sharing thing.
Daunting, not
why,
terrible.
you know, why not? I mean, I'm the last guy after an hour and a half. Let's just put everybody completely to sleep. And then just to sort of just get us oriented, you know, to the spots I've been talking about. There we go. All right, it doesn't look like I'm up yet.
Nope. Yeah, you're up. You're just not in presenter mode.
Oh, okay, great. Oops. I'm not in presenter mode.
I don't think a lot of our audience cares.
Oh, okay.
Important thing is being able to see those pictures.
Yeah, so I just need to get, the right one here. Okay, perfect. So you looking at the map yet, or are you looking at me?
We're seeing a map still now.
Okay, good. So then you can see that the distance between our Silverado Vineyard and our Mount George Vineyard is about 3.5 miles. So that, you know, it reminds me of that old saw, you know, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it, right? I mean, what is terroir? You know, we don't know what it is, but we know when you see it. And Joel really knows that really well, because obviously you put Cabernet in different spots and, you know, it just behaves extremely differently. And I would say from a, you know, the really critical thing is from a climate perspective is just how different this area is.
Try the lower right for the presenter, Russ.
Where am I?
Yep,
There.
just move over just next to the.
I don't know why I'm not getting that up.
Try it on the lower part of the screen. There you go. Here.
It's not making it. Anyway, you know what? Screw it.
It still looks good.
You know, I had this beautiful chunk of dirt that I was going to show you, but never mind. You know, from a climate perspective, it's really interesting that you could nearly set your clock to the difference between when we were harvesting here at the Silverado Vineyard and when we're harvesting at Coonsville. I went back. I promised you, Lars, that I was going to go back and look, and I stopped looking after 6 years because I had 3 11-day things. I had 2 10-day things, and I had a 9-day. And I thought, well, I think that does it, because it really is. It's a week and a half. You know, once we've started picking here in Stag's Leap, it's about a week and a half. We start picking down in Coonsville, and it's just it doesn't really matter. Early year, late year, rainy year, dry year, drought year. It just follows. So it's pretty interesting that way. We're lucky that here on Stag's Leap, we're on a hill that sort of slid off of Mount Stag's Leap and then flattened itself out. And so we've got that really amazing sort of Perkins loam that's got those old granite soils and super well drained here. And that's our sweet spot. We've got about 6 different soil types here at Silverado, but it's really the sweet spot for us is that middle kind of layer of the tiramisu that gives us that sort of granite soils. And that's where all of that fabulous fine tannin, plummy kind of Stag's Leap cabs comes from. And then when you go down to Coonsville, what we're really fortunate about is, you know, I think Michael was mentioning that sort of rain shadow. That side of the valley really gets very little moisture, and we're really lucky there in Coonsville, as Raj knows, to have deeply embedded in the soil is this immature tufa, because Mount George didn't ever blow its stack. It kind of leaked, but it never really erupted. And so it's called an igneous leak, which actually sounds like you need a topical cream to fix, but actually it works, because what happens is it moved these boulders of kind of a chalky tufa around 10, 20, 30 feet down below the surface. And what that tufa does is it collects water and holds it. So even if we get 12, 13, 14 inches of rain, in a terrible year, that tufa is capturing that moisture and the vines are going down and finding it. And so you're much more able to balance the vines naturally without irrigation out in that area. It's the most sort of miraculous spot. I worked in the valley for many, many years, and I never got to work down in Coonsville until I got to Silverado. And I'm just, it's the kind of spot that makes you look like a really, really good farmer, because it's this uniform, what they call it, Coonsville gravelly loam, and everything kind of ripens evenly, and you just look like a genius. The sorting is so easy because everything's kind of more or less the same size and same ripeness, and it's just I just love it. I know I'm supposed to like Stag's Leap, it's so famous and everything, and also I live and work here, but Coonsville is the bomb. It's really the bomb diddly. And if you look at how that manifests itself in the wine, it's just amazing. And I think you've got that in front of you, Lars, because that, unlike Stag's Leap, Coonsville produces this really broad, brawny, chewy, fleshy kind of texture, which is just awesome. And I think a lot of Stag's Leap can be a little bit linear and a little more serious about itself. But I think Coonsville gives that generosity of texture that I think everybody's looking for.
I have to say, every single one of the wines today were just round and generous and soft tannins, just beautiful examples of what Napa Valley can offer up.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to have to choose between any of them or compare. Have to be put in a position to compare.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So
I think
we're fortunate.
We're just really, really blessed. And I think, I love the notion that, Joel was talking about, that, we had a chance during phylloxera to reset the clock. I think the challenge is that we had a lot of nurseries that didn't have a lot of plant material. And so we get this new chance over the next 10 years to reset the clock once again. And we're going to have even better clonal material, even better ways to match that, especially rootstock material with the underlying soil types, and much more flexibility in our vine architecture to meet the challenges of the coming climate changes and in the coming decades.
Amen. There's always going to be something, and winemakers and wine growers will always be resilient. I love the fact that Joel called it a minor challenge. But it was awesome. So thank you very much, Russ. So we've had a number of questions come in and come out, but I know there are a couple of, since our theme is all about Napa, let's really try to address the elephant in the corner, so to speak. And I think when people talk about when we're basically with any California region, we want to know about what's going on, because all of us, even us here in New York, have heard about the fires. So I'd like to address a little bit about what the fires have meant to Napa, where it sits them today. And I think that as a group, again, as our listeners or participants or audience can understand that this is a pretty tight knit group. These are guys that are all constantly speaking with each other. And I think that one of the leaders in that area of discussion has been Cyril Chapalet. And so, Cyril, I'm going to ask you to kind of pick up on that topic to give us just a short answer to a very long and complicated question about the fires that have been in the last few years that we've all witnessed. What has been the impact, and what does that portend for the future?
So I'd say the impact has been severe, but we are very resilient, and I think that's what needs to be put together. It was devastating last year, the amount of fires we had. With the dryness that we have this year, we're all very, very concerned. I think we're trying to do everything we can do. The local community has done a lot to support each other, and the real impact is things like insurance. Being able to get insurance, because the insurers are basically saying we don't really We don't really want to have that risk. So that's, to me, that's gigantic. The other part is there's an awful lot of work that we're all doing to try to get rid of the ladder fuels, and those are the fuels, and that's the brush, that's the stuff that's underneath the trees that might get the trees to catch on fire. We did have some severe fires last year, both between what they call the LNU and the glass fire, and a number of wineries perished, and a number of homes, quite a few homes, went away. Although if you came to the Napa Valley and you were not looking to try to find the areas that burned, you could have a normal experience and never know that there was a fire. But I think that's, and I'm encouraging people, come to the Napa Valley. We need you to come to the Napa Valley. It's important for you to visit the Napa Valley and know that the Napa Valley is here, and it is completely open for business, and business is there. And as I said, you probably wouldn't notice. You could come to our place, even though a couple thousand acres of the back end of our ranch burned, you could come up here and not see anything that looks like a burn. So are we doing the right things? Yes, I think the valley is pulling together. The neighbors are pulling together. One of the things we've realized is the better prepared your neighbor is, the better prepared you are, and the things that you can do. I just have a kind of a picture that's kind of interesting. During the fires last year, we had to protect our vineyards and our property. And in doing that, you can pull this picture up. So pull this picture up right here. I'll just show you just briefly what happened here. And can you see that picture now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so that's a picture of the valley. There's where the cursor is we're going from Nyers Vineyard all the way over to Stagecoach. That's a 3.5 mile fire break, and everything to the north of that burned. Everything on the upper part of your screen did burn. It burned to that spot. We stopped the fire there. That's just what we had to do here to protect ourselves and our neighbors. And go to the next picture of the bulldozer. And these are the guys who did it. Now, the part that's happening right now, that's what happens when you have an emergency and you need to do it. Right this minute, I've got 100 goats that are eating one leaf at a time to try to deal with bringing the fire load down. We're using those every place. And we see it in the Napa Valley. There's teams out there. The vintners are coming together. The Vintners Association is actively working to try to find other ways to protect ourselves. All of my neighbors, all the people on this screen, we're all concerned. We're trying to do the right thing. So it's dry. It's the reality of it. But we are here, and truly, the fabulous thing is that the vineyards are in very good shape. The vineyards are the best fire break we could have. So just know that the vineyards are in pretty much unscathed about it. But if you're in the woodlands, in the forest, in the woods, it could be detrimental. So I hope that answered. If there's a particular question, Lars, I don't want to go into every depth of it. I think the people get the gist.
We're over the 90-minute mark, so we can't. But Cyril, did you say goats? You're deploying goats.
Yes,
can't
and
wait
most of us
try
are
the
kind of
cheese
shaking
made
our
from
heads
those
because-
goats.
Yeah, no, the goats will darn near damage your vineyard pretty substantially.
Yeah.
If can you see those?
Absolutely.
So those are our friendly furry little goats with their little fences around them, but they will literally eat with their little mouths one leaf at a time, or blade of grass at a time, and they make a big difference. So we don't eat them. We actually use them to help us out. So we don't want them in the vineyard though, because they would eat the vines just as quick as they'd eat the weeds and everything else. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that really quickly, because again, we're really running the gamut here on time.
Yeah, Lars, I'll just say that, of course, in terms of, people are going to ask about smoke taint, and I just want to let folks know that proximity, relative humidity, the distance the smoke traveled all play a huge role in whether it has very little to no influence on the fruit or a lot of influence. And so I just want to say that from a winemaking perspective, first of all of my neighbors here in the Napa Valley, as Cyril said earlier, are entirely focused on quality. We're not going to make a wine that doesn't taste good, right? And so you can have a lot of confidence in 2020 wines when they come out. I think there are a lot of people that won't make wine, but I think there will be people who will make wine just because of the eccentricity of where the smoke traveled and its density. Right. And I just want folks to know that Napa Valley, although there may be a few cases less in 2020, It's okay. There'll be another vintage. That what folks will make in 2020 for the folks that were lucky enough to get through unscathed will be terrific.
So Russ, speaking about another vintage and speaking about another life element, we addressed earth, water, we addressed earth and fire. Let's talk about water a little bit.
Yeah, so Carrie showed the clusters, on the backside there of Howell Mountain. We're looking at that right now, and what we're really studying is the ratio of canopy to the fruit set. And at some point, we're probably going to make a decision this year because it's incredibly dry. We just haven't had a lot of rainfall. But listen, that's not our first hukilau on that, right? I mean, John Muir used to say about California that it's a semi-desert, but it has the personality of a real desert. And so, we're used to that. We'll adjust the crop level to make sure that the crop loads are going to carry to beautiful ripeness with the amount of leaves that a vine can throw. And again, that may mean we make a little bit, smaller amount of wine, but it's going to be beautiful. And when I think about really dry years like 2015, we at Silverado 2015 was about 55% of normal for us. It was gorgeous. I mean, really intense fruit. So, it's not, this is something that we know how to live with.
All right. So on that note, I want to just thank all of our audience, all of our attendees for tuning in here and spending their time with us. We're getting toward the, we're way over the norm for Zoom, but pretty much everybody has kept with us. And we thank them. We've been able to give you some valuable information from this real group of rock stars. I want to thank all the attendees, the panelists, for giving us their time and attention and speaking with us and divulging some great information. And I think if nothing else, Teresa, you'll agree with me that we've gotten the sense of community of Napa Valley here. This is a united group of vintners that really care for where they're growing and where they're going. So
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And we're going to sign off. So,
All right, you guys. Thank you. It was great.
see you on the next webinar.